Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is going to be three things in one. First, it's another entry in my Anyone But K series, adding Ray Bradbury to that. Then, it's going to be a short review, some thoughts on the book Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. And then last, I'm going to be reading some quotes and giving some thoughts on those quotes from that same book by Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Okay, so as I mentioned, at the end is going to be some quotes. The quotes will have some thoughts and things like that. Then I'll probably have a separate video where it's just the quotes themselves, because some people just want to have the quotes and things like that. And I understand there might be some spoiler content. Some of the things that I talk about when I'm reading those quotes will have some information about the book, but the quotes will be about more general things about life, things that I thought of when I read this book, when I was hearing these quotes. I was listening to the audiobook when I first did it, then I went online and got the quotes. Now, the review that comes before that will just be a short review, just some few thoughts, kind of what the book was about. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers. I think it's something that y'all should check out for yourself. When I first heard about this book, I've been listening to some other Ray Bradbury stuff, but for some reason, I had it mixed up in my mind with Gene Roddenberry. I was like, is this guy who did Star Trek? But no, it's not. It's a different guy. And I'll mention that when I'm talking about the intro, talking about Ray Bradbury and things like that. But yeah, it's a great book. I was a bit more apprehensive to actually get into it, and I'm glad I finally got into it. I'd heard the name before. I knew it was something that you've probably heard that phrase, something wicked this way comes. And it definitely is something wicked, and it does come to the people in this book, to the characters in this book, and I think it's done in a really good way, and I can see the inspiration that this has had on other people. And lastly, we went backwards here. Firstly, it's also the Anyone But K series, which is the speed drawing. If you're watching the video version of this, if you just listen to the audio version, there should be links somewhere to get to the video version. And for those of you who are familiar with the Anyone But K series, my reasoning behind it, there's going to be timestamps on the screen or somewhere in the contents, somewhere here, where you can jump to the part where I actually talk about Ray Bradbury in specific. Then I give a review about the book, and then also a timestamp for when I start reading the quotes. But now back to talking about the reasoning behind the Anyone But K series. I've just seen this shirt. You've probably seen that graphic of Che Guevara in the red with the background of the white and black face. It's a appealing aesthetic. But the people who actually wear this, how many of them actually know who Che Guevara was? Because I looked into it. Che Guevara is not really a good person. It's kind of a garbage human being. But he did have some influence in the world. And he continues to have some influence in the world. Some people who actually know what he was about still like him. And that says something about those people as well. But most people who wear this shirt, I'm here recording this in Nairobi, Kenya. I see people walking around in like bedazzled versions of it. And I'm just wondering, do you even know who Che Guevara is? But Che Guevara, he wasn't a good person. And I kind of thought, like, well, the shirt is aesthetic. The design is appealing. Most people just wear it just for the design. Like a lot of people in Kenya, you see somebody wearing like a University of Michigan shirt or Griswold's, not Griswold, Griswold's a TV, or like something, someone, Bradbury's family reunion of 1995. They weren't at the reunion, but some of those shirts kind of just make it here. So I kind of get that. But for some people, wearing something on a shirt is a form of advertising, is a form of signaling. I know, for example, when I was in the United States of America, sometimes I'd go back to certain areas. Even one time I was wearing my alma mater of West Liberty State College. I was wearing that back in Bethesda or until like high school and things like that. And somebody was like, hey, because they also went to that school. I think I might be misremembering that, but you get what I mean. I was wearing something. When was this? Some time back. And I'm becoming an old man now, which this book has something to do with that. And I think that is part of why this book appealed to me at one time. But yeah, that signaling is there. What is the intention? Some people are signaling things they might not be intending. Someone's wearing a Steelers shirt and they're like, yes, I like the Steelers. Other people are Steelers fans. Oh, did you see the game this week? Oh, I don't even know who the Steelers are. I don't know what football is. They're like, then why are you wearing this shirt? That would be something in the United States of America. But here, I don't presume to think that if somebody's wearing a shirt, like they actually were supportive of that person. But this is part of what I was thinking with the series, with the Anyone But K series. Because there's so many other people that I would think would be better, that if the world actually would be aware enough of these people. Maybe they'd ask someone, "Oh, who's that on your shirt?" "Oh, no, this is who and so and so." And then somebody goes in and finds out more about those people. I think the world would be a better place if Che Guevara was replaced by many people, including Ray Bradbury. I've done separate ones. The last one recorded was with John Stuart Mill. And for him, one of the primary things was he's kind of considered the father of empiricism, and I really enjoy empiricism. It's something that helps me guide myself through my reality tunnel in a way that I think is comfortable. There's some people that I don't necessarily like that much, but I think are worth knowing more about, at least more about than Che Guevara. Someone like Herbert Marcuse, he's one of the people on there. There's people I just really like a lot that I think more people should know about, like Amari N. Rothbard, there's Thomas Sowell and people like that on there. There's musicians like Ludwig van Beethoven. Ode to Joy is still something that really appeals to me, really gets to me. And I just also had some idea with Beethoven, like what is considered German music? Is that something that is Germanic? Is it something about being German that will make that song appeal to you more? Or is it in a situation where it's just arranged in a certain way where if you actually played Ode to Joy like in the woods, and you just went out there, I think like the animals would kind of stop and listen because it's just something that is so visceral, something that speaks so much, I think, to life that just transfers over these boundaries and these things and limitations that we have. So this is just some of the people that I have on there. You can definitely check that out. Have like a merchandise store where I'm selling some of these things on there. That's part of what I'm doing with this series. So you have the shirts out there and many other things, cups and things and other things like that. Now, just without further ado, I'm going to get into the actual Ray Bradbury thing now. And as I mentioned, first it's just going to be the intro. This is the part explaining the Anyone But Kate series. Then we're going to get into a short thing about the book, and then I'm going to read some quotes and give some of my thoughts with that. So to open up, Ray Bradbury has a website. You'll be able to find links to that somewhere. It's actually just raybradbury.com. You can go check that out. And when they have this, when somebody has come out, it's an official thing, and they're explaining who they are in their own words, I might as well use some of those words. So I'm going to pull out different sections from his website to tell you more about who Ray Bradbury is. There's a good chance, even if that name doesn't sound familiar to you, some of his works are familiar to you, and for sure, some of the things that has been inspired by his works are probably more familiar to you as well. So here we go. Ray Bradbury, this is from his website, a few excerpts. 1920 to forever. I think I like that, and I think there is an aspect that's kind of true about that, where his works will continue to inspire people for a long time, because he started a foundation of things that people have built on that. I think his works probably will be read and listened to. And part of my apprehension with reading certain people is some of the older things, they miss out certain things. Like they go back in the past, and before the internet, for some people, it was really hard for them to imagine the internet. So when they're writing certain sci-fi, certain things in the future, they kind of assume certain things that have been made almost impossible to think of still existing due to simple advancements like the internet that we take for granted today. I wonder what is the things that we are going to have in the future where we can't imagine teleportation, but we can already imagine some of these things. So there's some things out there that probably are still just unknowns out there that will completely change the way we perceive the future. Okay, so getting into this. This is a quote that they chose to open with. "We are cups, constantly and being quietly filled. The trick is knowing how to tip ourselves over and let the beautiful stuff out." So Ray Bradbury inspired generations of readers and viewers to dream, think, and create. His childhood was spent in the Midwestern small town of Waukegan, Illinois, and he mastered his craft in Los Angeles, where he forged a special creative bond with the city and its many cultures, raised a family, and drew as feverishly as he wrote. During a career that spanned 70-plus years, he wrote more than 400 short stories and nearly 50 books across a variety of genres. His enduring novels, novelized story cycles, and story collections include The Martian Chronicles, 1950, The Illustrated Man, 1951, The Golden Apples of the Sun, 1953, Fahrenheit 451, 1953, The October Country, 1955, Dandelion Wine, 1957, A Medicine for Melancholy, 1959, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, 1962. When Bradbury used his gift as a master visual storyteller to venture into film and television, millions more discovered his work. He wrote the screenplay for John Huston's classic 1956 film adaptation of Moby Dick, was nominated for a 1962 Academy Award, and won an Emmy for his teleplay of The Halloween Tree in 1993. The Ray Bradbury Theatre, a TV series for which he adapted 65 of his stories, also earned several awards. And more of his stories were adapted for Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Alfred Hitchcock Hour. On the big screen, many feature films were based on his work, including It Came from Space, 1953, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953, Fahrenheit 451, 1966, and 2018, The Illustrated Man, 1969, Something Wicked This Way Comes, 1983, The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit, 1998, and A Sound of Thunder, 2005. During the space age, Bradbury emerged as a leading futurist through his stories, books, articles, and lectures. His ideas transcended the boundaries of fiction and became the real-life dreams of astronomers, astronauts, planetary scientists, and mainstream readers of all ages. Few individuals in the world have received as many space-age recognitions as Bradbury. So that's it. That's a few quotes from there. You can check out it for more. And there was something that somebody said in there was Ray Bradbury is one of the few people that really helped change the way people think. And I think that is an apt and accurate statement about the things that he's done. How many of these things have you actually heard about? Like you see with Twilight Zone, somebody like, oh yeah, I know about the Twilight Zone, but I never really knew Ray Bradbury. But yeah, Ray Bradbury had a lot of stories in there. That's 65 of these stories on his own show, and then having the influence of these things. A few things in there. I'm wondering, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. There's also the Jules Verne thing, which I'll probably do a separate thing of the quotes on that, but so that Jules Verne story, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So there was something about those 20,000 that maybe there was something that maybe this was a bit of an inspiration to him off of that. Let me see. The Jules Verne book was written in the novel was originally serialized from March 1869 through June 1870. And this is the thing, I've mentioned some of these things with the changing on the future, being like, do I really like this thing in the future? This is going way in the back, and did it still carry on? And that book still carries on, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Even though there's things, of course, like the internet and things like that, that kind of would change a lot of the basic issues that are going on with that book, but it still carries in my estimation. So I might be interested in checking out The Beast from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That I may have already watched something or read something that was inspired by it, but not known that it was actually from Ray Bradbury and this specific book. With the books that I have read, that I'm sure of, that I listened to audiobooks are things that I really enjoy, is The Martian Chronicles, as well as Fahrenheit 451, of which I'll probably do some coming up in this series with quotes from those particular books, because I think there's a lot of things that also spoke to me in that. Another thing that speaks to me about Ray Bradbury is the fact that he writes. I write less than I do draw. Like, do I? I don't know, it's about 50-50. But I draw a lot. I do a lot of doodles, a lot of things like this. A lot of the ideas that I think of when I draw something, it normally comes with a lot of backstory of what this character was doing, where they're from. I don't do as much copying. Most of the stuff that I do is just stuff off of my head. So it also comes with the stories. And then sometimes I'll be taking time writing posts on the blog or writing scripts or writing things to actually have these videos about, and they'll have these other visuals going with them. So I'm trying to find a way to put those two things together and actually be more creative. And that goes back with the actual first quote that this opened up with that speaks to me a lot, that probably will transition into the actual short review about the book, is we are cups constantly and quietly being filled. The trick is knowing how to tip ourselves over and let the beautiful stuff out. Now, with this is something that I can relate to, and I think a lot of other artists can relate to. One of the earlier quotes earlier things, observations, somebody told me about, even the great artists and things like that. Like, a painting is never actually complete. But there's a time when it gets to the point where it's good enough. There's almost always another brushstroke somebody can put down, another piece of etching to put some shadow in something. So always another line you can put, another kind of light source you can kind of highlight and things like this. But it gets to a point when the image you intended to display is already something good enough. The story that you intended to write has already enough of the parts to communicate the idea of what you had in mind. Or sometimes it's something where it's like, hey, this is something that you've thought of in your mind. It's time to put it down to pen and paper and realize it out into the world. And this goes further and think on just everyday life with people. There is something that I think people keep things away from them, and this is something that somebody recently pointed out. Stefan Molyneux recently pointed this out about people being shy. He said being shy is not necessarily just about you. It's actually kind of selfish to the world because there's things that are rather great about you that if you actually went out there and talked to enough people, maybe it's the people that you're talking to that are the issue and it's not so much yourself. But eventually you put yourself out there, you go talk to people, and you'll be sharing, you'll be giving back to what the world is. And I think that's a positive thing. If you are creative, if you have some abilities, if you have some ideas and things like that, don't short shrift yourself. I mean, get out there and you'll never know what little part that you might be able to say might blossom into something a lot bigger, a lot larger. And I think living in current timeline at this time, we're living in a time when there's more ability to share information and more ability to get other information than ever existed in the world in history. And I'm in part, and I thank you all for listening to this. This is in part why I'm doing series like this, which is a part of a bigger project of just getting stories and ideas and creativity out there that I'm working on with a few friends that I'm super excited to announce to y'all soon enough. Maybe by the time you listen to this, that project will be up and going and you can already find some links somewhere to get to that. Or maybe you actually got to this from inside that project and that will be extra super boosted on that aspect. So I think with this book, it's carried on there, but I might as well just go again to Ray Bradbury's website and read y'all what it actually says from that about this book, then just give a few thoughts on it. So Something Wicked This Way comes. Watching the boys vanish away, Charles Holloway suppressed a sudden urge to run with them, make the pack. He knew what the wind was doing to them, where it was taking them, to all the secret places that were never so secret again in life. Somewhere in him, a shadow turned mournfully over. You had to run with a night like this, so the sadness could not hurt. That's a good quote. I shall say a bit more on that. And before I actually read this part about the book that's written in there, it has some more about the book than I knew before I came in. When I first actually picked it up, it was not Audible. I did it more off of a name recognition of both the author and the book itself. So I didn't know some of the aspects that are going to be mentioned. There's some parts being mentioned in here that I enjoyed actually getting to know these directly in the book without actually being aware of these topics. So there'll be some spoiler material. There should be a timestamp somewhere telling you when this is over, or you can just pause right now and go listen to the book or read the book yourself. It's about a 10-hour audiobook, so it's a decent sized book, but you can get through it. I think you'll just pass through it really well. If you've already done it so and paused and read, let's continue with this. I just found it's also part of 3-book series, so I might check out those other ones as well. Dandelion Wine is the first part, and then there's also Farewell Summer that's on there. And I see here that maybe, unfortunately, there was a 4th part planned, Summer Morning and Summer Night, that Ray Bradbury might have been planning on writing, but maybe he passed away before, but his work will still be with us here forever. So now getting into what it says about the book itself. It's autumn and a mysterious carnival arrives in Greentown, Illinois. Neighbors Will and Jim, 2 young boys whose birthdays fall on either side of Halloween, are fascinated that the carnival arrives out of season in the middle of the night, offering rides and sideshows with hidden horrors. One of the proprietors can adjust the carousel to change its age. The other, Mr. Dark, is an illustrated man whose body art has strange powers. When Will's father realizes the true insidious nature of the carnival, it takes the wits of both father and son to end the carnival's predatory cycle of dread. So part of why I really enjoy what they said with the quote that was picked out to this, is when I first picked up this book, it started off with that, just the kids playing in kind of a glade and things like this, and they hear, okay, this dynamic being set up about it, and I was wondering, is this just going to be about the kids and things like this? But something about this book is to have Charles Holloway actually in the quote there. They introduced the father into the book, and he's a little older of a man, and I think that kind of spoke out to me. And maybe when I first heard it, I was like, no, this might be my future. As a current single man in late 30s right now, I'm getting to the situation where I'm contemplating, I would still be blessed to find somebody and have a family. But when you get to this age, you start thinking, how old will I be when my kids are of like in their teens or just getting to the point where they're starting off their adulthood? You're thinking, okay, I'll be really old. Will I be able to deal with that? And I think there's a dynamic of that with Charles Holloway actually dealing with this. And I think with this book, I'm trying to imagine how I would have approached this book or taken this book in if I had read it when I was in my teens or around the age of the kids. And I think it's something that kids can read. It's something that's open. I think it's not a PG-13 thing. I think anybody can read this book. But now reading it as an older person now I'm wondering how would I have taken this book if I already maybe in a couple of years found somebody and I was just with my wife and then they could having kids. Would that hit me in a different kind of way? And with this, it's who is the main character of this? Is it Will and Jim or is it Charles Holloway? Who is the protagonist in this? And I think it's the three of them. It's the dynamics that are formed with these three different people. There's almost something that works in this where I'm thinking, okay, with Will, who is Charles's son, he looks up to Jim, of course, as his contemporary, as his friend, and then looks up to his father in some kind of weird sense of, are they quite sure about the relationship with this person? This person's a bit nebulous, he's a bit out, and he seems to be getting some things out of them due to the fact that Charles Holloway's chosen field, chosen life seems to be a lot more subdued than the potential that Will sees in Jim. Jim himself seems less tied down, less comfortable with his life, with where he is. He's like, okay, I got to do more. I got to go out. I got to do this. And there are some aspects in this where you'll see that Jim takes advantage of that, where he's not comfortable with being himself, even though Will is looking at him in a sense of saying, this is somebody I'd want to be like. But there's some general accepted thing where in their friendship, Jim apparently will slow himself down to keep himself at the level that Will can keep up with, and then Will also speed himself up to a level that Will can keep up with. And that's the running thing that's in there. That's all running along, and then having Charles look at them and see, okay, they have that dynamic. They're working that way. I don't know if Charles himself was aware. I'm not recalling quite if he was aware with Jim having that aspect and Will having that aspect of trying to catch up to Jim. But he's looking at them and seeing this is something that, oh, can I join them? Can I be part of them? But he's understands he's too old, he's past it, and there's something really great in the end of the book that kind of ties all of this together with the whole running aspect. That's stuff that goes into kids running through life in a certain way, people running through life in a certain way, life running through existence, running through time in a certain way. Those are things, I think, things that are repeated that I got out of this book. And another thing, I think Charles looks at the kids, and with the kids, they kind of embody two different things that people have, at least two things. I mean, we're rather diverse. There might be more than two things. But in general, there's one side of us that thinks, I should try and do X, Y, Z. This is what's going to free me from this situation. And then other sides, they have these limitations and say, okay, I have to be practical and I have to do ABC. I have to do ABC before I can even consider doing X, Y, Z. But Jim seems to just be jumping to the X, Y, Z and saying, these are the things I have to do. No really rhyme or reason. This is just what I feel like doing. Whereas Will has this other part of him where he's kind of more practical, like, okay, ABC are my certain limitations, and I'm going to work within this. And there's something that happens in the book where Jim seems to start going away from him, running away from Charles. Finally, that he lets go and he starts following that energy that has with him. And then with that absence, Will heads to his father and gets to know his father in different ways, gets to know more about his father, and starts realizing there's other facets about who his father was that he was unaware of. And then things kind of get tied in after all of this. Now, with the book, there's some supernatural things that are involved into it, as it was mentioned. The Illustrated Man. Now, I think that Illustrated Man, now that might have been pulled out as a separate kind of story. But just this whole idea of the carnivals, the carnifolk, that's definitely done here in a strong way, in a very evocative way that I think y'all will enjoy. Definitely check this out. This is definitely a heavy suggest. Definitely go check this out. If you haven't read this already and you're still listening to this thing, I highly suggest you just pause and go check this out, and I think you'll be better for it. So yeah, that's what I got from this book. I think the primary thing is these three characters together. It might appeal more to men, to males, masculine identifying people, than it would to women. It seems to be more about boyhood, young adulthood, male responsibility, certain tropes and things like that. And I think this might have been, of course, something Ray Bradbury was speaking from his own lived experiences. You're talking about the childhood. You're talking about looking forward to getting into adulthood when you're a child, and then you're looking at somebody who's at the other side of adulthood who seem to have skipped out some of the typical things that are done in young adulthood and chosen to become a father later on in life. And he was dealing with those things at his end, where he's saying, is this something that I should have done? Am I actually capable enough to do this? Whereas the kids were thinking, like, when I become a young adult, these are the things I'm going to do. One of them was a lot faster to get there, as you'll see in the book. And that's the general dynamic that I think was coming out of this. So I think this would be good. If you have kids, I think boys, definitely buy this book for them. Maybe if your father hasn't read this, I think this would be a good thing to do it. if you're somebody in your mid-teens and for some reason you're reading this and you have an older father who might have some issues or not have as close a relationship, I think give this to them. I was like, yeah, this is hitting close to home, right? You're hitting close to home here. This is going to be me in some few years. But I think in the end, it turned out to be relatively good. And with the villains, with the antagonists, which I think is a big thing, they're kind of secondary to it. They're not necessarily as evil as one might think, but it's more just the nature of nature, how there's good and there's bad. And these antagonists, they were written in a way where you could kind of understand their nature. This was just them being them due to several reasons in their history. It wasn't just like these are just people who are evil for the sake of being evil, but they had a rhyme to their reason. Is it not rhyme or reason? Yeah, I'm going to go with that. The reason for why they were doing certain things is because it rhymed with things in the past. It seemed to be they were as trapped with the time thing, and it was this family, these characters that we're with in this town of Greentown, Illinois. They're the ones who are kind of free from this cycle of time. Yet they seem to be really focused on, oh, I don't have enough time, I need to get to this point. Or I didn't have enough time in the past, I need to get back to this point. And because of this timeless carnival that comes through there, I think the showing their lives and the choices that they can make and the decisions they choose to actually have and affect their human actions, how they actually affect time and they affect their lives. And yet these other people in this carnival are kind of stuck in that kind of on the train tracks. They have to follow these train tracks. This is what they have to do. They have to keep doing this in order to just exist. And I think that's my review from it. And I think now we're going to get to the quotes. Let me know also in the comments or wherever. Send me an email. Let me know. Contact me somehow about your feelings about the book. When did you first read it? How did you find out about it? Did this actually make you go out and read it? And if so, that's awesome. I'm super excited to get more people to actually start reading and listening to more of these things. Now, all the quotes here I'll be reading are from Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's not in any particular order in the book, but some of them I've grouped together to talk about certain topics that I think they kind of relate to. And I shall get into reading the first one here and now. We can't be good unless we know what bad is, and it's a shame we're working against time. That's Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Next quote. A stranger is shot in the street, you hardly move to help. But if, half an hour before, you spent just 10 minutes with a fellow and knew a little about him and his family, you might just jump in front of his killer and try to stop it. Really knowing is good. Not knowing, or refusing to know, is bad, or immoral at least. You can't act if you don't know. Acting without knowing takes you right off the cliff. And that's Ray Bradbury, from Something Wicked This Way Come. So these are the first two quotes, and I think these two quotes are mostly about knowledge. And time is also involved into that. Just the way things change. The knowledge of certain things will change the way you relate to those things. Simply just knowing a little bit more about the people around you, what's going on, will change your reaction to that. It's the same exact person before you know something about their family. You humanize that person. There's this thing we do, I think we anthropomorphize certain things. And certain things that are anthropomorphized seem to take more care. Or in some cases, people anthropomorphize things like a storm and think there's something negative coming out of this storm. And they'll put things that are not on that. Where is the intention with this? What are the actions that are taken? Where are the human actions? And something like this really speaks to why I have someone like Ludwig von Mises on the Anyone But Kay series. We're talking about the human actions. Or why I just recently did John Stuart Mill for the empiricism. And I think this is something that most of us do. I know my mom said this is something I used to do when I was a kid. just ask questions. But I think we all did this. But it continued. As I kept getting older, I started getting to like how-to books, how does this work, how is this built, and just a wide range of things. I didn't necessarily specialize in anything. Specialize? That word sounds odd. I'm saying specialize. I think that is a word. I didn't actually specialize in anything. Learning different languages, moving to different countries and continents, learning different things, and starting to figure out how does this work? Why does this work in a certain way? Why was this done in that way back then, and then here it's done in this different way? I didn't necessarily understand how certain people seem to be kind of fit in just doing the things that they do with the limited knowledge about the things that they do, that they seem to do. Because when I would ask the people, why are you doing this? Some of the people wouldn't be able to explain those things. But now we live in a time where you can go online, you can find a lot of information, you can find a lot of knowledge about certain things. But still, to this day, I find people not actually taking that extra step to understand where someone is coming from. They'll hear a quote that was said by somebody, or it's not even the quote from that person. They'll go to a certain source that says this person reported that somebody else said something, and then take that one report and broad brush a whole bunch of people when they could actually go and find the actual original quote by that person, and often they could find out more about why that person was saying things. But maybe we just don't have time. Maybe there's something that they think in the future, like Jim in this story, they think there's a point they have to reach that they don't want to take the steps to reach that point. They see this point in the future, they want to get to that point. They know by doing this, by accepting this, that will get them to that point, or that will keep them focused on running towards this point. Maybe they feel that's what they're doing. That's why they don't really take the time to actually find out and know about certain things. Or they're too fixated on one thing, in a similar way that Will was fixated on Jim. And then once Jim actually was gone, in order to try to understand Jim, in order to try to save Jim, in order to try to reconnect with Jim, he started going to his father, started going to Charles. In this attempt, Will started learning more about Charles. And Charles also started learning more about Will. They started learning that, okay, there's actually things that I can relate to with this child. I'm not that distant from him. I can still be a part of this person's life by just getting to know more about each other. And that relationship, that knowledge, that connection that was built, knowing about each other, actually ended up preventing the town in general from going off of this cliff. And there's other characters in this town that seem to be more by themselves. Even with someone like Jim, yes, he has a single mother, but the father was there. I don't know if the father died or was ever with the mom and things like that. They mentioned the mom. I'm not quite sure. I can't quite remember if they mentioned his father, but his father was not present. But they lived next to each other. And Jim and Will, being age mates, living next to each other, seem to have a stronger connection. But Charles, in the home with his son, the mother is also there. They don't really have as close a connection, but he's been more present in his life. So there's a lot of people, I think, in people's lives who are present, but you don't really know much about them. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. I can relate to having that. And since for some time, I've been working towards actually building stronger relationships, getting to know the people in my life in a stronger manner. And hopefully, if I'm ever blessed to have children, that is something that I will try my best to not get to this point where I'm feeling like my kid is in his young, I think it was in his youth. Was it teens? Let me double check. Yes, it was 13. And as I mentioned, get some knowledge. When I'm recording some of these, I'll do some of these live. I'll do it live where I just read through it. But then in many cases, if I have a question, I go online and try to find out that information about it. And that's just what I'm trying to say with these. Getting to know things, getting the information about the things is good. You can't be good unless we know what bad really is. And there's a lot of people who seem to think they're being active in a societal sense and say, we need to protect the world from this thing in the future, so we need to do this. And then you go up and ask them, okay, so what is the actual thing we're protecting from, and how will doing this actually change and affect for a better future, and what is that future? So it said, we have a problem. The problem is X, so we need to do Y in order to Z. In fact, they don't even normally say the Z part. It's just say, X is a problem, so we need to do Y. And I say, okay, if X is a problem, please identify how you know X is a problem, why is it a problem, and then why would Y actually be the thing that we need to do to address that problem, and then what is the Z result that is going to happen if we do Y about this supposed problem. And most people don't actually, many people, you find many people don't actually go through that process. It's not my job to educate you. Like, well, if you think I should actually act in a certain way, I'm not just going to go right off this cliff with you. I want to actually know. And there's another aspect about here, people who are refusing to know. And that's where it gets to the point that really irks me in this situation. If you're online talking about a certain topic and you're making a statement, a declarative statement that is demanding action from other people, those people should justifiably ask you to present some reasoning. Not just you go look for an interest, you search for it yourself. Like, no, you're making the statement. So I want to know what you personally think. What got you to come to this point to make this statement that you think I or other people should act on based off of what you said? Or are you just yelling? Are you just yelling out into the wind? Is that just all you're supposed to do? Is that what you're actually doing? And I think those people who are refusing to know about the actual details, about the things that they claim to care of, that comes to a point where I consider that to be kind of evil, kind of bad. I mean, getting to the point of evil where it's like, it's immoral at least. So they refuse to know is bad or immoral at least. I think, yes, it's at least immoral if you are making some statements about things, especially statements about morality, about what is ethical to do, when you don't actually know details about the thing that you're speaking about. That gets to that kind of point. And my last thoughts on this is this idea of dehumanizing people. Just saying this is a bad thing. In-group, out-group dynamics. This is our group, that's the out-group. I've not really had, this is maybe part of my upbringing, I didn't really have the benefit to just live in a certain group, get to know that certain group, and just assume this certain group had the best way of doing things. So with my background, with my lived experience, I didn't really have the comfort to just sit into certain things. From relearning just how people say simple things like greetings, to understanding why does this group of the people in this area think the entire existence came to be based off of these things. So getting to know and understand, that's something I'm still trying to apply today. Trying to understand, why do these people believe or act in a certain way? Get to know a bit about their families, about what really drives them. And I think this ability to relate to other people is what changes today than it has. It gives me hope that some of the destruction that people are imagining, this cliff that some people, oh, the world is going off the cliff, it's worse, this is the best time to ever have been alive that we know of, has the most potential that we know of. There's so many things that have been very important that were the cores or foundations for a lot of problems in the past and a lot of positive things in the past that we didn't really know about. But right now, we can get to a point where we can really know a lot that is worth knowing about the certain things and know identify the unknown knowns about those things. Like, we know this acts in a certain way, but we know these things like in the atom level where it's so small that we're not going to be able to know that, but we know most of the practical things that apply into this point. So yes, we know how countries have come to be, we know how religions come to be, we know how families come to be, but we might not know the specific details of why that particular family came to be, but we can recognize these kind of things in other people that might not be things that are in our lives, but we know that other life forms, other things, other beings have certain desires and wants and things like that. And I think we can find more productive and more peaceful and more win-win situations in order to actually achieve those things together without going back to some of the horrific things that humans still are capable of. And I think that's something that's shown really well in this book with Will, Jim, and Charles. They're more like the humans, learning new things about themselves and each other, and doing more and acting in certain ways. And there's something, I think, about the people in the carnival, the people come on the train, that have been trapped. They've been trapped on this train, on this track, and I think it's like the history type of thing. This is the kind of things that just keep going, where they've kind of let go of their humanity, and now they're reduced to these elements, and they're things that just kind of happen, these natural forces that just occur and move through this place in a certain way. So I think there is an aspect to that. We don't have to be trapped. We don't have to join the train anymore. There's some certain appeal to that, but that's something we can leave behind and go more to the actual actions that people take. Okay, so now on to the next quote. 3 a.m, thought Charles Holloway, seated at the edge of his bed. Why did the train come at that hour? For he thought, it's a special hour. Women never wake then, do they? They sleep the sleep of babes and children. But men in middle age? They know that hour well. Oh God, midnight's not bad. You wake up and go back to sleep. 1 or 2 is not bad. You toss but sleep again. 5 or 6 in the morning, there's hope, for dawn's just under the horizon. But 3? Now, Christ, 3 a.m. Doctors say the body's at low tide then. The soul is out. The blood moves slow. You are the nearest to dead you'll ever be, save dying. Sleep is a patch of death, but 3 a.m, full wide-eyed staring, is living death. You dream with your eyes open. God, if you had the strength to rouse up, you'd slaughter your half-dreams with buckshot. But no, you lie pinned to a deep well bottom that's burned dry. The moon rolls by to look at you down there with its idiot face. It's a long way back to sunset, a far way on to dawn. So you summon all the fool things of your life, the stupid lovely things done with people known so very well, who are now so very dead. And wasn't it true? Had he read somewhere? More people in hospitals die at 3 a.m. than at any other time. That was Ray Bradbury. Something wicked this way comes. So with this, the current timeline, we're living in a time of memes. A lot of memes go around. And I've seen a few memes coming out, like especially like introvert pages or things like that, talking about how 3 a.m. in the morning kind of gets people to have certain energy and drive and things like this. Now, this is something that I think might be more practical with current timeline due to the fact of reliable electricity and things like this. So people's ability to be awake at different times has changed. But you could also go back to something that prehistorical, whereas I just read somewhere that our sleep cycles are not necessarily supposed to be just 6 hours in a row or 6 to 8 hours in a row. Like our bodies evolved in a certain nature to actually have like 3 hours and then you wake up for some time, you do activities, then you go 3 hours again, or 4 hours, you wake up some time, do activities, or you're actually up and about at night. And you can think about why this might actually apply. Just think about our evolutionary environment. Would you want to be in a situation where your entire tribe, entire village, entire group of people are just sleeping through the night? You probably would have certain people, probably the middle age or older males in general, might be the ones who are kind of caught up to actually stay awake over time and keep watch. So you sleep for some time and you kind of rotate. Some people are on watch, so you sleep for a little time, then you wake up, you keep watch, and you go back and you sleep. Whereas you want the younger men to maybe sleep for longer, have energy, and be able to go out there and go hunt and fight and things like that. So there could be these kind of things. And then the women, of course, the women are important of taking care of the children, being physically healthy enough to be able to bring forth the next generation of people. And they have things to do around the home during the daytime, around the village, around the camp or whatnot. So they might be the ones who are like, okay, you just sleep through and then we're going to protect you in a sense. This could just be the division that we're having in society as we're developing in those prehistorical societies. That could be something in there. But I think there is something. Do y'all have any stories of being at 3 a.m. where it's like 3 a.m. you just have this drive, like stories like or introverts are kind of, if I remember to have some memes, I might put them up on the screen. Not quite sure if I will. But that kind of thing where it's like, okay, you come out and then the rest of the day you're kind of down and you don't have these energies and then something about 3 a.m. in the morning. Now this might be something more fitting to that time now, especially when you have, I guess Illinois, that's Chicago, Illinois. I'm trying to think of the latitude and long latitude that it's at. What's happening in this time, but he's talking about this in general. I don't think he's necessarily talking about with autumn. I'm trying to see like when's the daylight savings, is that a thing that's already there? I think they should take out daylight savings to begin with. But if they have that situation where you have the different fluctuations. Here in Kenya, it's like 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. all around the year because the equator kind of runs through the country. So you don't really have too much fluctuation with the times. So at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're definitely way closer to sunrise than you are. It's a lot further back to go to sunset. But if you have some places in the United States of America, I know sometimes you get to a point where it's like the sun goes down like 9:30 or something. But the sun doesn't really come up too much later. I think it's the days get longer, not necessarily like the nights get longer, depending where you are. If you're in Alaska, 30 days of night. Okay, so here in this story, what is your estimation? Is long way a longer distance to you than a far away? Which one has more length to you, long or far? I don't know. Maybe it's depending on your perception of it. Long when looking back in the past. Would you say far way back if you're looking to the past? I don't think you would use far as much talking about the past. It was a long time ago, but you don't say it was a far time ago. Normally, like it's more like a distance, physical distance. But then far away, something far away in the distance. You're looking at something far away in the distance, but you wouldn't say I'm looking at something long away in the distance. So I think that usage out there, maybe it's just his knowledge of words, but just knowing the language itself, they could mean the same kind of distance. But I think in the past, the long is in the past, and the far is to the future because you're looking forward to the future. So it's kind of far way away. Okay, so that's just my general thoughts. I like the kind of the visualization is, and this is at the start of the thing coming in. So the kids have their own interest in it, their own excitement thing. But then Charles was already kind of like, there's something kind of off about this carnival coming in. All people seem to have their apprehensions about it, and there's like a slow build that comes up with this. It's a really good book. Please, 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 please check this book out, or just let me know what your favorite quotes are as well. Now, moving on to the next group of quotes. Now, look. Since when did you think being good meant being happy? Since always. Since now, learn otherwise. That's Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. The next one. Too late I found you can't wait to become perfect. You got to go out and fall down and get up with everybody else. Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. The next quote. Nothing extraordinary about me, except I'm 54, which is always extraordinary to the man inside. And that's Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now these three quotes, what do you think carries on with these three quotes? To me, it spoke to a sense of ennui that I think I see mostly in the West and places like that. There's a lot of people in life, and this is part of also having access to all this information. It could be positive, it could be negative. It's just a tool. And I think this information, and ennui is a great word, it's a feeling of weariness and dissatisfaction or boredom, and it's spelled E-N-N-U-I. Get to know that word. I think you'll start noticing it in many places. There is an aspect of this, specifically in the United States of America, the pursuit of happiness, the American dream and things like this. What is this happiness that people are pursuing? Do you think a lion wakes up in the morning in the savannah and is like, I'm going to pursue happiness today? When you look at a tree, do you think the tree is sitting there and being happy? When you look at the birds flying in just that magnificent, majestic way, do you think they're really flying in that wind and carrying those different currents and things like that and thinking, wow, I'm happy, I'm finally happy? I don't necessarily think there is that, but there's an aspect that I think human beings anthropomorphize other things and say, that is a happy looking animal, that is a happy looking bird, that tree is happy if it's in this kind of place. When that isn't there, that is something that sentient beings, specifically human beings, have put onto themselves. I know when you have pets or when you have certain other animals, certain other higher functioning animals, they have preferences and things like that. You can see joy, you can see sadness. Animals can actually cry on certain things. So there is that aspect in there, sadness, pain, but the crying is more of a reaction to pain. Now, I'm sure some certain animals can get to the point where they have certain feelings going past. Like there's some parrots and things like that. Might be able to, parrots, crows, and they might have some of the thoughts. Octopi also. they might have certain higher thoughts where you can say we're almost getting to emotions. Things that humans define as emotions could be things these other creatures feel. But I don't know if they ever feel bored. I don't know if they're ever dissatisfied with the general knowledge. Maybe this is because they're closer to just the state of nature, whereas humans have created these things to kind of separate us, to feel like, oh, we are separate from it. We might be extraordinary. Like they said, like you said in this quote, we might be extraordinary, like when you're inside, like which is being a human being might seem extraordinary to being human when you're in a human being, when you're in a human society. But from the outside, there's nothing really extraordinary about being a human species. Being an earthling that's developed biologically and evolved to be what we are, what we're doing is kind of what you would expect these kind of simians, these Homo sapiens to do, given the things in history, given the asteroids that haven't slammed into the Earth, given the plagues that haven't just ravaged through us and killed us all, given the different kind of things where a human decided to do this instead of that and didn't take over this area and end up doing this other thing. Those are the things that are kind of practical to come up to this point where you can see some kind of following towards that. And you don't have to be perfect. This is something that I talked about with the art before. You don't have to have the perfect drawing, the perfect story before you put it out there. You can put it out there and let other people talk to it. And some people feel like, oh, if you're criticizing me, if you say one thing to me, you're destroying me, you're negating my existence. No, somebody's saying, I don't believe you. I don't want to follow what you're doing. I'm not going to say what you want me to say. Does not get to a situation where you negate and erase an entire group of people because you don't want to call them the things they want you to call them. You don't want to be attracted to them. You don't want to deal with them in a certain way. That doesn't erase an entire group of people. You can take these criticisms and work with them and otherwise. So this thing, since when do you think being good meant being happy? Many, many times doing what's good is going to lead you to a situation where you are technically less happy than you are before. And I think this is one of the negative things about the United States. They say the pursuit of happiness, and people think the guarantee of happiness. And in my estimation, I think there's certain things to do with liberty and freedom and choice and the ability to discriminate against certain people without having to limit their movements and their freedom and their ability to choose. Those are things that do limit somebody's ability to pursue happiness. The pursuit of something is not the guarantee of catching that. And you see this kind of thing with the Will and Jim kind of story. You see this kind of thing with Charles kind of looking at them saying, can I run with these kids anymore? You can go out there and run. Jim understands I got to slow down in order for Will to catch up with me. Will knows that, yes, I understand Jim's kind of slowing down, but he can never, if he decided to run on full speed, he will keep going. And there is something in this book that happens where Jim kind of goes out and Will's like, why did you leave me behind? I wanted to try and at least keep up with you in the way that I could on this actual journey, this pursuit to actually come into this thing. And it's like, but the good way to do things may not have been what made him happy. And the bad way that Jim actually ended up trying to do that resulted in him not being happy. And I think at the end of the book, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it actually goes back. I think it actually gets, you'll see in the book, I don't want to get too much spoilers, but the things that are done happen, and then he seems to return to some level of happiness. And at the end, I think the three primary characters of Will, Jim, and his father Charles are, and Will's father Charles and Charles Holloway, are happy and content. I think they're more content with their positions in life. They understand some negative things have happened. Some of the people who were seeming to pursue happiness by itself, that were discontent, that were bored or were not happy with their lives as their status in life, seem to pursue those things and have negative outcomes as they came up to them. And I think a lot of the promises from the people in the carnival were for happiness, not contentness. There's a lot of people promising happiness, and I think you see that somewhat with some of the... It's another side thing that's been odd to me that I kind of noticed. You look at some of the happiest places in the world, like I think Denmark, Belgium, some of these countries, and then you also check which are the highest number of people, the highest usage of things like antidepressants. You look at certain things, certain groups in the United States of America have advocated for. Women's rights movement and specifically say, okay, we've had feminism for this amount of time, I think since like 1912 or a little earlier than that. They've had that modern feminist movement. But you look at people asking, are women happier today? And they will respond that they're not as happy. Now, is this due to just objective things? Objectively, they might be safer, they might be healthier, they're definitely living longer. But why are they seemingly this ennui, this boredom, this dissatisfaction with their current stat in life? Is it because there's so many more things that you can know about? In the past, if you lived in a small village, you had 2 or 3 job options. You get one of those 2 or 3 job options. Chances are you're going to become content with that. You'll be happy. But now you're living in that same small town. Those are the 2 or 3 job options that are available there that work within the lived experience that you've had to be able to achieve. But you have the access to see 300 different kind of job options out in the greater world that you ostensibly could go out and pursue. That might reduce your actual happiness or contentness with what you have. Not even just other jobs, but you see other people doing a similar job that you're doing in 300 different locations in 300 different ways, and that can actually raise your dissatisfaction with what you're doing and what you're able to actually achieve. So there could be something that's in there, and I think there's an aspect in here that's taking from me as well, where it's like, okay, you got to understand. And of course, as I mentioned, nothing extraordinary about me besides being 54, and I'm thinking right now at my age, if I happen to find somebody who's willing to have a child with me and bring a new life, I'm probably around this kind of thing where I'll be getting towards 54 and my kids in like his early teens and might be having this kind of thing. So I was like, Ray Bradbury, you bastard, you're really getting at me with this story. But yeah, that's my thoughts of those 3 quotes, and I'm moving on to the next ones. God, how we get our fingers in each other's clay. That's friendship. Each playing the potter to see what shapes we can make of each other. Ray Bradbury, something wicked this way comes. The next one. The stuff of nightmare is their plain bread. They butter it with pain. Something wicked this way comes. Now these are about friendship. And as I mentioned before, like the boredom type thing. How are you bored? Like if you're bored, that is on you. Like you have all this access. If you're listening to this and you're ever bored, that is something about you. Because you can find access by the same place you heard this. There's thousands of other things, other people talking about other things. You can actually start creating things like this on yourself and put that out there, where you can find thousands of other sources of things to actually do with your life. In the vast majority of cases, some of you might be in some prison somewhere or in some solitary confinement where somehow you also have access to audio or visual files and you're actually getting this as well. But you can do stuff in your head. You can think, you can do stuff. Being boredom is a personal issue. So with this one, The whole friends thing. There's something that people say, okay, you get to know somebody, you try to shape them into something that they're not. There is an aspect of that where I think is negative. But this whole idea that we affect our friends, we affect our relationships and things like that, I don't think that's a negative thing, especially in your younger years. I think when people are less formed and less set. For those of you who do work with clay, who have, that's another thing I highly suggest if you haven't tried it, definitely do that. You can see why a lot of early religions had this whole idea of clay, the gods making man out of clay, because you get this lump of dirt and things and water and you mix it together and you shape it into these things. But there's an aspect of that. I think in this sense, I read it as something not necessarily negative. Because if you've worked with clay or not, you understand certain clay has certain abilities. If you get a 1 kilogram chunk of clay, you can only make certain things with that limitation. You're not going to be all of a sudden to make super thin kind of filamenty things out of it. You're not going to make massive kind of sculptures out of the things. Certain clays have certain elements, so you can work with what's there, but you can shape it into different ways. So that thing I kind of understand. You can kind of mold and shape things, and it's a thing that works together, and that's the friendship. Each playing with the other, each playing the potter to see what shapes we can make out of each other. I think that's the key part. It's not just I'm changing you. If you have certain things in your friendship where you say, okay, or friendships, and I think specifically relationships, specifically ones that actually end up in partnerships where you're going to start a new life, and that's part of this thing that's very key with this, is a lot of people say, I have certain standards, I have certain limitations, and I'm never going to change these things. But those very same people will often go to somebody who doesn't have those same features or other features that person considers important and thinks they can change those other things. In my estimation, if you have 10 things about your personal life that you say, I'm never going to change these things, allow your friends and other people you deal with to have 10 things in their lives that they're never going to change, and you accept that. Now, the other things that are willing and able to change, y'all can change those things, and it's better if those things are the same. If you say, these are my favorite foods, these are my favorite restaurants, I'm never going to change on this, don't go and expect that person to change their favorite restaurants to match yours. That's the kind of thing, especially when it's those same things. If you're not willing to change and move on your position off a certain topic, don't expect anyone else that you're with to do that. You could find somebody who doesn't mind you having that and fit with them with that, but please, please, please don't get in the situation where you're the only one. You might find somebody that both of you are willing to be that potter and change that aspect of each other and say, okay, now we're both going to drop this and change and try for different things. That's a more healthy type of relationship, I think, that's in there. And with the relation to this, I think if you, the person who just says that one type of thing, recognize there are certain people out there, the stuff of nightmare is their plain bread and they butter it with pain. There's people out there who enjoy, for various reasons, many things that probably were broken in them in childhood for many of these cases, that enjoy hurting other life forms, hurting other people. They might do it intentionally, that might not, like the people in the story, they just seem to be caught on this train. This is what they were kind of turned into. They had let go of the things in their life and fallen into this, gone off the cliff and fallen into this situation where that's their mentality. Their main currency was pain. They existed to kind of just hurt other people. And it's a good thing to recognize there's some people like that, and knowledge, as I mentioned in the first kind of quotes, the knowledge, knowing more about what people are doing, why they're doing it, knowing more about things is going to make you avoid those people who are actually that way and be closer to the people who you know. I know these are the things that this person is not going to change for this reason, so I'm not going to push them on this reason because I understand their reasons. I know more about them. I would jump in front of a bullet to stop this because I know more about their family. I know more about where they come from. But I see many people getting into relationships saying this person is my friend, and they know very little about, I think, the core things, that core clay part, that foundation of who this person is, and they try to make changes and don't understand, I'm changing this, yet this is something that is very precious to this person, or this is something that's maintaining some support structure, some support bearing structure, or some load bearing structure in this person, so I'm changing, and then you change that, and then all the things that you enjoy about this person end up crumbling from lack of knowledge about this person, or it gets you in a situation where you're in a position of danger because you haven't searched enough to understand that, no, this person, they're not just trying to be a better person. There's something where it's like, these are the nightmares, these are the stuff of nightmares. That's their plain bread. They seem to be stuck in this horrific place and they're trapped. And I think even in the story, there's certain people who couldn't really be saved, and there's others who were able to be saved due to their position and their situation in life. Okay, so moving on to the next one. That above quote about the stuff of nightmare is part of this larger quote, and I'll be reading the larger quote now. The stuff of nightmare is their plain bread. They butter it with pain. They set their clocks by death watch beetles and thrived the centuries. They were the men with leather ribbon whips who sweated up the pyramids, seasoning it with other people's salt and other people's cracked hearts. They coursed Europe on the white horses of the plague. They whispered to Caesar that he was mortal, then sold daggers at half price in the Grand March sale. Some must have been lazy clowns, foot props to emperors, princes, and epileptic popes. Then out on the road, gypsies in time, their populations grew as the world grew, spread, and there was more delicious variety of pain to thrive on. The train put wheels under them, and here they run down the log road out of the Gothic and the Baroque. Look at their wagons and coaches, the carving like medieval shrines, all of it stuff once drawn by horses, mules, or maybe men. And this is Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. So this quote, as you see, it comes from a longer thing with the stuff of nightmares are plain bread. He's talking specifically about the people in the carnival, and that's an archetype for a certain sort of person. There's some people who unfortunately are stuck in this, and you've seen over time. So this is one of my estimations with the world in general. People inherently, life forms inherently don't have a good or bad. There's that aspect of knowing is part of that part of, if you know and you choose not to know, you're bad. Some people unfortunately are kind of stuck in that. And this is kind of one thing I was thinking. Like, you have some situations, some people are truly trying to do good. The lions we're talking about, you don't really think a lion's like, oh, I'm unhappy. But if for some reason a lion saw like a human child, was like, for some reason thought, I'm going to try to help this human child instead of like just eat the human child, it might go to try to pick up that human child from the nape of the neck. The way you see in cats and other big cats and other animals, I think dogs do that too. They pick them up from the nape of the neck, their kids, and move them around. If a lion tried to do that to a human child, that would kill the human child. But it was trying to do better, but the lion did not know. So you wouldn't go and say, like, that lion should have known better and consider that lion to be evil, even though the action that the lion did ended up having bad results for the human being. Even for the lion, because the lion could have been intending to help it. But that lion also doesn't have the ability to know and understand how to better help that human. Instead, maybe, I don't know, just get away from it or just protect it until like another human comes by. Then when the human comes by, you kind of run away and then like, okay, maybe the human will go and help that lion, the child in their own way. That's something that it might be able to think. If it had the ability of knowing that and then chose not to do that and instead went for the nape, then you can say, okay, that's a bad action. At most. So that's kind of what I was thinking with this. We're talking about certain people that might be stuck in certain things. If you're aware of certain things, you're aware of certain things in society, it's good to be aware of the bad things. The bad things will stick out more. So if you have a situation where in the past, you only knew about 10 things happening a year. Now out of those 10, 2 of those things are negative. So you might think 20% of the things that happen in any given time are negative. But now we live in a time where you can hear about 1,000 things in the world. So even if things have halved, let's say it's down 10%, it's down to 10% when there's 20% of negative things in the past. That 10% still represents 100 things you've heard of that are bad. So you've heard of 10 times more what people in the past used to hear about in total that are bad. So it might seem that the world's a lot worse today than it has been in the past. But I guarantee, like I am almost certain that if you actually look into the details, you will find that that is not quite true. There might be certain fields and certain things, a minority of things that are negative, but almost all those things were worse in the past. But it's still good to pay attention and notice the negative things, especially the people who are stuck in that, who actually make it their plain bread, who for whatever various reasons, it doesn't mean you damn someone. But you will damn yourself by putting yourself in the company of certain people. And that's also the thing in this story, that you say, yes, you understand, you can go to the carnival, you can see certain aspects of them, but recognize who these people are. Recognize what that carnival is and avoid those aspects of it. Because if you think you can go there and you can mold these, those are also the people. You think you can go in there and you can change these people to fit what you want. No, these people are stuck in their ways. They are that evil. This is their plain bread. That is who they are. They will mold you and change you to fit their devices, not the other way around. Okay, so now on to the next quote. Sometimes the man who looks happiest in town with the biggest smile is the one carrying the biggest load of sin. There are smiles and smiles. Learn to tell the dark variety from the light. The seal barker, the laugh shouter, half the time he's covering up. He's had his fun and he's guilty. And all men do love sin, Will. Oh, how they love it. Never doubt it. in all shapes, sizes, colors, and smells. Time comes when troughs, not tables, suit appetites. Hear man too loudly praising others, and look to wonder if he didn't just get up from the sty. On the other hand, that unhappy, pale, put-upon man walking by who looks all guilt and sin, why, often that's your good man with a capital G. Well, for being good is a fearful occupation. Men strain at it and sometimes break in two. I've known a few. You work twice as hard to be a farmer than to be his hog. I suppose it's thinking about trying to be good makes the crack run up the wall one night. A man with high standards, too. The least hair falls on him sometimes wilts his spine. He can't let himself alone, won't let himself off the hook if he falls just a breath away from grace. And that's Ray Bradbury. Something wicked this way comes. This is something that I would like y'all to just think about someone that you know in the socio-political sphere that speaks out a lot about certain topics. Politicians, celebrities, intellectuals, public personalities. Which ones do you think about seem actually personally happy? How many actual politicians who seem to be touted by certain people as these grand examples of being moral and things we should look up to, how many of them seem happy in their personal life? How many people involved in being very cheery, talking about how they should do this for the greater good of people, seem to be actually applying those things in their personal actual lives? Now, people have the capacity for great evils and also for great goods. People have the capacity to harm you and also benefit you out of not even knowing that they're doing it in those actions. It's just things that happen. This is just part of nature. This is part of existence. And I think that is something to think of when this quote just talks about these things. And that's something that I've noticed. That's one side of things. And I think on the other side, you see certain people who have certain standards. There are certain levels where you might see them do something that you consider amazing, and they're not really that happy with it. This happens in a lesser aspect of me on the art. Sometimes I'll be drawing something like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that's really cool. They'd be really excited to see that drawing. But what I had in my mind, it was like, oh, no, it's actually not anywhere as close to as good as what I had in my mind. So that might keep me down on certain things. But again, you just let some of that beauty out. You look at certain athletes who seem to score this amazing game, but they go home and they're still practicing hard. They're still like, damn, I should have done this better. I should have done this in this other way. When this person did this, I should have noticed this and done this other thing. So it's that level of standards that can kind of hold someone down. So don't just look at the way somebody is holding themselves out in public and just expect that. And I thought of this quote recently. There was something, or not quote, it's a thing. I thought, a thing, the school bell will ring. No, okay. So all over the place with that. So I thought of this recently. If somebody is self-confident, then they hold themselves to high standards. Like, okay, I have to do this in a better way for themselves. But if somebody has a sense of self-importance, then they hold other people. They expect other people to supply certain things for them. They hold those people to a certain standard of supplying them with things that they lack in their own perception of themselves. And I think there is an aspect here where some of these people are boisterous, they're out there so they can laud people, they can laugh and they can shout, and other people are like, look how great this person is, look how happy this person is, because they don't feel that in themselves. Whereas some other people who are holding themselves on the self-importance might not be as tied into or needy or feeling I have to appear in a certain way, and they're focused on their internal self and holding themselves to that point. So there is something in there, and I think there's some positives, there's some negatives. Actually, do go out there and big up people who need the big upping, but also don't get too caught up on certain things. At least get to understand, if you do know that you are capable of something and you could do better, then I think it's okay to focus on it and say, yes, I should have done better. But also don't just crucify yourself and not also recognize all the positive things, the good things that you have done and actually achieved by actually even making that attempt to begin with. And I think this was a good part. This is another part of the story. A lot of really good back and forth between Will and his father, Charles, as they get to know each other more. And it's imparting knowledge. It's not necessarily just saying you should act in this certain way, Will. I am your father, listen to me. But he kind of comes into a tentative thing, like, I'm feeling myself into this person's life, and he's like, okay, these are things that I thought of. I'm imparting this knowledge onto you, Will, and you do with it as you see fit. I think there is an aspect over there that I find very admirable, and I think is a good technique. Yes, as a parent, there's some guidance things that you should do, but I think it's mostly also imparting knowledge to your actual child and giving them the confidence to make decisions in and of themselves and get to that point where the things that they know, and then once they know these things, they can act on those things, and I think become a full agent in the world. Now on to another quote that has Will talking to his father again. "Dad," said Will in a voice very faint, "are you a good person?" "To you and your mother? Yes, I try. But no man's a hero unto himself. I've lived with me a lifetime, Will. I know everything worth knowing about myself." "And adding it all up?" "The sum, as they come and go, and I mostly sit still and very tight. Yes, I'm all right." Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. This is just another one of those really good moments. Really suggesting if you're a father and you haven't read this book, or maybe you read it before and you have a kid, especially a boy. I mean, I think girls can read this too. Yeah, you're just guys, gals, and everything else in between. You can get this book, and I think there is that parental type of relationship here. It's getting to know more about each other. Now, many parents have these conversations and don't have this kind of strange relationship that we see at the start of this book, where there's some distance between Will and his father from both sides. Will he's just part of the youth and enthralled in that, but that's less his issue. I think this is more from Charles's apprehensions to being an older male and having his issues, having his responsibilities, and feeling like he can't really connect to his son. But then this bridge is kind of the imagined, because I don't know if it was actually an expanse there. It was this man-made expanse was found to actually not really exist by them actually bridging that imaginary gap that they had, turned it was actually a road there the entire time that he just didn't choose to actually use. I think that's a more accurate kind of idea on this, because I think in this situation, it's a 13-year-old, still a boy. It's on the father. They don't really mention his father, Charles, and his father's relationship, but you go back in history, and some of the issues I've noticed as well, like I have some apprehensions in how friendly me and my parents' relationship was. And I was doing that by comparing. There's this one funny meme where it's like, oh, parents when comparing you to the other kids, and they're all like laughing. And it's like when you compare them to other parents, they're like all sad, all angry. And there is an aspect of that where I look at my relationship and I compare it to what people I was growing up with had in their relationships. And as I mentioned, moving on to different continents and different places and things like that. So I'm comparing my parents who grew up in a village in Africa with the relationships that parents have with friends of my age who grew up some people grew up in Spain, some people grew up in the United States of America their whole lives, some people came from Argentina, so this kind of thing, and you kind of mixing that up. It's like, no, you're not going to be able to actually just fit those across the board. You have to get to know more about those people. You're just seeing the perception. As in the previous quote, people might seem to be happy, might seem to be laugh and shout or a seal bark or those type of things, but how many of them actually had good personal relationships? Some I found out, unfortunately, the home relationship was definitely nowhere close to as good as I perceived from the outside. Some that I might have thought, oh, that was not the kind of situation I had. I look at them and I say, okay, wait, I thought those people were doing worse, so I thought my people were doing worse, and then it turns out, it was actually not quite there. So that was from lack of knowledge, but that's being a youth, that's being a kid. But when you get older, I think there's things. I know everything worth knowing about myself. You get to a certain point where you might know many of the practical things about yourself. And being all right, and I think at the end, Charles is kind of content. You could see there was a kind of contentness. There wasn't really that sense of ennui that I talked about. Yet, Jim, he seems to be like, no, I need to be this other person in the future. I need to pursue this other thing in the future. And that seems to be something that enthralls Will as well. But he sees his father, who I think is more content and set in who he is and more confident in who he is. And you can see that also when he comes against the primary villain, Mr. Dark, in this book, and he stands up to him in a certain way. And I think it comes from that confidence, and that confidence even grows in a certain way. I think there is something that's kind of good with this, and adding it up, just being all right. It's all right to be all right. It's not something where you have to be this magnificent, heroic being. Like, being all right is quite all right. This, again, is a big focus on a parent's relationship with their child. Specifically, in this case, a father and a son. And the father thinking that, I've done all right about my family. I may see other people doing other things. I've seen other people do worse, but I know I'm comfortable enough in my situation. This also goes into historically, people looking back at the past, and you look at these heroes and you say, okay, those heroes were the greatest people ever. So if you hear something bad about them, you feel like you're attacking my hero. This person kept, some of these people were just all right people that happen to do great things. Some of them were also all right people that happen to do horrific things. You don't have to damn people completely in the past. And no man is a hero unto themselves. I think a good focus on that was the heroic things are things people perceive about you, but in many cases, you know what it took to do those things. And some of the people that cheer you for those heroic things, consider you heroic, would not understand the sacrifices and the choices that you made in order to achieve that thing. A good example of that is just recently Max Verstappen just won his first F1 championship. And he was talking about his family in an interview shortly after and saying, this is great. It's finally some thanks back to my family that the efforts that they put into this have not been in vain. His father supposedly took a lot of time away from the family, away from his two sisters, away from the wife and the mother who, although she was also somebody involved in motorsports, involved in that world, Max kind of said that it probably was part of the reason that the marriage broke up. He's saying with the sisters, like, this is the things that dad was investing in. Something came out of that. So here you have a situation where the father was somewhat heroic to Max by taking these sacrifices and doing these things. And we look at Max and say, oh, what a hero. But then he comes home and it's like, he's wondering if some of these things, did this play a part in reducing the happiness of my family and things like this. But these are the give and takes of humanity. When you look back in history, keep that in mind when you look at your parents. Keep that in mind when you are a parent yourself. Keep that in mind. What actually would qualify as all right? It's not being there because you're supplying certain positive things for the family, for the kids, for your other people that you care about, or being there in a sense where you're not necessarily present, you're not necessarily being a positive aspect on it. So what is the all right that's kind of defined in this situation? Okay, now moving on to the next group of quotes. Is death important? No. Everything that happens before death is what counts. Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Death doesn't exist. It never did. It never will. But we've drawn so many pictures of it, so many years trying to pin it down, comprehend it. We've got to thinking of it as an entity, strangely alive and greedy. All it is, however, is a stopwatch, a loss, an end, a darkness. Nothing. Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Don't let them take your crying. Turn it upside down and use it for their own smile. I'll be damned if death wears my sadness for glad rags. Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now the primary topic of these three is death. And it's fitting as we're coming towards the end. There's going to be two more quotes after this, but this is the last group. We're winding this down, and thank you all very much for listening. The things that came before are the things that matter now. This also matters in its own way. But this whole idea of death and nothingness is, what is nothing? Is nothing an actual thing? Is there a thing called nothing? Is there a solid thing? Can you define nothing? Or is nothing the lack there of something? Because if you can think of nothing, it's not nothing. Once you actually picture something as nothing, it becomes a thing that you think is nothing. It's not what nothing is. Nothing is the absence, is the lack thereof. And that's how I approach my idea of death. And I think one of the central things of sentient beings, especially humanity, was trying to understand death. A lot of religions and things like that, spirituality goes into that unknown. What came before existence, what comes after? I think the after is more important. The before, people can kind of say, okay, it's this and this, and creation this and this, and that and that. But what is the after? Is space nothing? No, space is something. Space, there's things in space. Space is between the things, but there's things in space. Space is full of most things, but they say like most of the space is just space. That's what they call it, space. There's nothing out there. There's no physical things. But even that thing that we can't notice is a thing. Now, what is death? What does death mean to you? What does it mean to other people? The person who dies, they don't come back and tell us about what's happened after death, despite what some dogmas and some belief systems might say. That is not something that has been shown to happen. So accepting that, if you accept that, let's accept that for the sake of this. So we're going on. Even if you don't accept that, one thing we can agree on is the effect that certain things dying have on other people. Like I mentioned with these series, I think Ray Bradbury died, And there was more in this series, Greentown series, I think, and it kind of ended. Sometimes people will go back and they'll cobble things together and be like, okay, we're continuing this in the words of, but it's not the words of necessarily. They had the Ray Bradbury thing, 1920 to forever. He has died, but his thoughts and ideas do continue. Like what happened before his death still matters. That's why it's to forever. Those things still matter. Those things are still affected. As this picture, a severe picture of him as a kid, it's a really severe bowl cut and things like that. But the things that happened before from people that were dead also informed him, and then he added to that, and that has carried on. And those are the things that matter. When somebody dies, yes, some people might have the fear and concern of what's going to happen to them after life. But that fear and concern and things like that are normally based on what has happened before that person's life. For many people, if they had that situation where they molded each other's clays, they really had that friendship, they actually knew about that person, I think you'll find they might be sad that they're not going to have this person in their life anymore. But if they're confident that this person led a good life, was fulfilled, was content, did things that they knew that they wanted to do and tried to achieve certain things, failed at certain things, succeeded at certain things, but was there. You felt like you actually were there with that person. Then I think many of those people would be confident, especially when it comes to certain people who have certain concerns about the afterlife and certain dogmas. I kind of wonder that if you truly thought this person was a good person, especially you say don't speak ill of the dead, so let's say all these positive things about somebody at the eulogy and eulogize or talk to them after, like if you truly believe those things, then wouldn't you be happy thinking that this person has actually entered the positive aspect of post-life that you think of? Maybe they're reincarnating as somebody better, or they're in some kind of idea of heaven with the good part. Or in many cases, some of the people didn't really look back and they think, oh, maybe I did double check. I should have kind of talked to this person in the past, or I should have apologized about this, I should have helped in a certain way. Now I'm not going to be able to do that. Or they're worried because I saw this person doing something bad and I didn't tell them, I didn't say something about it, and now I'm worried they're going to be in the bad place, or they're going to be in the bad afterlife place. I think that's something that normally comes more into this kind of thing. So I do think there is something about death, that finality, that end, that makes people look at what happened before in a different light. But it's the people who are alive and able to witness that do it. But the death itself might not be as important. But to some who put some importance in death, there's some people who put some importance in your destruction. Those are some of those people who have those nightmares of plain bread. Some of those people who butter that bread with pain. They will get pleasure out of tormenting other people, out of your damnation. They'll get pleasure out of that. And there's something that goes on in this book that you'll see. Definitely just check it out. And if you've seen it, if you've read it, if you know what I'm talking about, if you listen to the audiobook, the part where he's telling them, you don't let these people take your pain and turn that upside down. Don't let them turn your frown upside down and use it for their own smile. You should do it in the inverse, and you should actually take your frown and turn that upside down into a smile. Or look at them and see, there's certain kind of people. These kind of people who would wear your sadness as glad rags. There's people who would do that. And look at those people, and when they frown, smile at that. If you see certain people talking badly about what you're doing, that is a good enough barometer as any that you're doing something good. You're doing something worthwhile. So don't just value people for the sake of valuing. If you know more about those people, you know more about yourself, you know more about the actions that you're taking and the reasons that you're taking them for, you will find yourself to be more resilient to criticism from people who don't know you, who don't care about you, who at least haven't taken the effort to understand what it is that you're doing. And in many cases, you will take pleasure, like, yes, by this person, by you being ignorant to this, by you failing at these things, I know who you are. That whole thing, it's like, I don't care if you boo. Boo me as much as you want. I've seen what you people cheer. That's the kind of estimation that I think knowledge about yourself, self-knowledge about yourself, and also knowing about the effects, knowing about other people, knowing about the things that can be achieved in the world will help your contentness and give you more venues to actually achieve the kind of happiness that you can get out of the life that you lead. Yeah, so moving on to the last ones. The library is always an adventure. Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and Holding a Book but Reading the Empty Spaces. That was Ray Bradbury from Something Wicked This Way Comes. So that was it. That's the last quotes, and we've gone from a long journey, and these are things that happen in books. We've gone from talking about time and relationships and things like this, the anthropomorphizing of things, the relationships people have, getting to understand people better, to at the end talking about death and how through words and talks and thoughts and visualizations we've anthropomorphized death, which death might just be the the word that we use for nothing, for lack of existence. But death needs to exist first. Even death itself is defined by having have existed to begin with. People don't look at the universe and say the universe is dead. You don't look at a planet. I guess you can see the planet before it formed. Once it's formed, it's an entity called a planet. And then, like, okay, there's no life on the planet, but we still consider it to be a thing by itself. But then if a meteorite kind of came and slammed into it, or if its sun kind of went nova and obliterated the nature of those atoms coming together to form that entity we call a planet, we would say, okay, that planet has died, or at least has been destroyed, has ended. But it had to be something before it was that. And I think the library is an adventure. That's part of it. I think this story, it's like Charles does happen to work in a library in some extent, and the kids kind of go into the library and get some aspects out of that. Library to somebody might be that physical brick and mortar type of building. You're saying, oh, that's lost. But there's still now a library. Now the library that we read, even if you go on social media, it's a library of sorts. It's a library of thoughts and tweets and maybe some advertising and other things like that in there. But it's a library of the human condition, of the human body politic, of the human animal. So you're getting different kind of libraries in there. And that is an adventure of sorts. It can be an adventure. So I'm saying, if you're bored, it is on you. The world is a make your own adventure kind of thing now. There used to be those stories where you'd read and make your own adventure. Now they're going to video games and things like that. But the library is an adventure. The library is just a source where you go, has a compendium of knowledge and information that you can access and partake in. And you can make your adventure depending which aisles you go to, which books you pick up, what you decide to intake. And I think there is an aspect of that there. Which some people might think it's a boring place, but to me, it's been the place that has helped me be able to get this. And many of these books of Ray Bradbury are very well, and they, from being in libraries, have led and inspired many other people to do many things, and probably you out there as well. And then this last quote of holding a book but reading the empty spaces. And I think this is part of what makes it to be truly an experience. And this is, I think, a difference that I see some people being dictated to. Some people want to dictate to you. Some people who just want obedience versus the people who want to tell you a story. The people who want to take you on an adventure, want you to go on an adventure with them. The people who just want to inform you about certain information. And then when you read the books, this happens a lot. People look at a film like, oh, this movie's not that good. I like the book better. Why is that? Because in many cases, people were visualizing something in the books. Yes, you can also write a lot more and go into a lot more details of certain books. And there's certain things where it's like it's a different medium. You know, something you can do in a painting is going to be different that you can do in an animated movie because you can have more time to do things. When you have a book, you have a lot more time to do certain things. Somebody will be sitting there willing to read something over a couple of days, but will they be willing to watch a movie that's like a word for word, actually scene by scene kind of thing with it? Probably not. I might be able to, but very few people will be able to do that. But with the book, I think the part that comes from the book is those empty spaces. Not just simply the words and the spaces between the words. Just recently listened to Exaltation, another good book. Ted Chiang had a short story in there about somebody who was talking to somebody who didn't have written. A missionary talking to a tribe that didn't have a written language, and they're like, why are you teaching me to write with these spaces? Like, we don't speak in spaces. Like, their language in their minds didn't have spaces between the words. They just said things. So someone was trying to explain to them the spaces, why you put spacing between the words, let alone commas and periods and things like this. Like, why is there space between, like, I am a person named Silas? Why are those spaces between those words? Like, it's a mental pause. So it's anyway. But I'm saying this is between the lines, reading between the lines, not just the empty spaces, reading between the lines. That's also the thing that's in here. But I think those times when you're reading something, you read something and you pause and like, wow, what's between this? You fill up those empty spaces between the words with certain thoughts and ideas. And I think that's the adventure that really gets from actually talking about certain things. And maybe that's a difference with social media. Sometimes there's no time to really pause. There's so much coming in, you get deluged with things. And that's not a situation where you go as much of an adventure as nothing. But some of y'all do this as well. Some of y'all will actually go there sometimes 3 a.m. in the morning. You'll sit there, instead of sleeping, instead of doing that, you'll wake up and you just be like, find yourself reading through a long, multiple conversation series between back and forth between groups of people that you don't even know about a topic you don't really care about that much, and get some kind of adventure out there. Like, ooh, wow, oh, we're going here. Oh man, I can't believe you said that. Oh no, you're standing up for this person. You try taking in these characters. So that's just some of my thoughts and ideas behind that. And I think we've come to the end of this. Yeah. I think I shall wind that down here. There's many others in this series. Not all of them are like this. Like the one I did previously was John Stuart Mill, and with that one I got several quotes from different locations from him. So some of them will be like that. People like this with Ray Bradbury, as I mentioned, I probably come back and do another one in this form where I do a short review of maybe the Martian Chronicles, probably Fahrenheit 451 when I re-listen to that soon. I'll take down some more notes and now come out with some more of a review with that, and then also do quotes particularly from those sources. And then I also have someone like Patrice Lumumba coming up, who, with someone like him, I'll just give a bit of history and a bit of my thoughts about what he means, what I think about him, the things I've experienced and known about him, and then give some quotes from him directly. So there's different ways I do this with different series. There's already a bunch of different people up, like Thomas Sowell, like Frederick Douglass. Some of those people are already up. You can find links to the merchandise store for those designs. You'll find links to the videos of these other people, and I have a lot of other content. I'm contemplating when I'll actually get to the point where I might even go further and just do like people that I know, people that I think are kind of cool, great. Like I just say, hey, this is my friend Steven. I'm going to do like a shirt from him. I don't know how many people want a shirt of Steven, but some other people would actually want for these people who are relatively more famous and things like that. So let me know what you thought about this book. Have you read this book before? Have you listened to this book before? Are you going to after you've listened to these things? Do you care about spoilers? I'm glad that I went into this without kind of knowing about it. I'm glad I saw my way through it. At the start, I had a bit of a break. I was like, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do this, but ended up being rather enthralling. Ray Bradbury, great work. What are some of your favorite Ray Bradbury works? Have you watched any of the Twilight shows? What are your favorite Twilight show episodes or Ray Bradbury TV and theater and things like that? Let me know about that stuff. Let me know if there's other people that you think would be worthwhile to be in this series. Like, for example, I did one, like the Constitution of the United States of America. I was reading the Constitution and I used the Founding Fathers in different parts of it. I was reading the Bill of Rights and things like that. And it was stuff like that. I might go back and get some of those people and now get different quotes from those people and do like individual ones highlighting those individuals in their own way. Some of the people in this series might not be people you agree with or consider great, but in general, it's just anyone but Kay. Kay Guevara sets a rather low bar on people that could fit in that kind of aesthetic, and I'm going to get different people on this. Thank you all very much for listening. Like, share, subscribe if you are listening to this on a platform that you can do that. There will be a central location where you can get all this information soon. And for the Anyone But K series, for the merchandise in specific, you can go to anyonebutkcarbon33.com and you'll find a link that will send you to the merchandise store, and it will also eventually send you to the location where you can get all the other videos and other content in this specific series. But I also have a lot of other things that I do that I shall be mentioning sooner or later. Goodbye.